The first thing I noticed was the way my son froze the moment his eyes landed on the crystal bowl in the center of my table. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around his mouth, the kind of reaction most people would dismiss as nerves or surprise. But I'd raised this boy. I knew every small twitch he tried to hide. And at exactly 6:12 p.m., as the warm light from my kitchen bounced off the glass, I watched something dark flicker across his face. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from. And stay with me, this story starts quietly but the truth hits hard. He recognized those chocolates instantly. Mom, where did you get these? Marcus asked, his voice too light, too controlled. I kept my expression soft, practiced. Calmness has always been my greatest armor. Why these? I gestured to the bowl. They're the chocolates you made me. I thought it'd be nice to share them tonight. His wife laughed from behind him, unaware of the crack forming in her husband's composure. Marcus, honestly, you've been on edge all week. They're just chocolates. Just chocolates. I almost smiled. I'd spent the last 6 decades learning that the most dangerous things in life often come disguised as everyday kindness. A phone call delivered in a cheerful tone. A friendly neighbor who watches too closely. A birthday gift that arrives on the doorstep in a neat little box, signed with hurried handwriting. But I didn't let any of that show. I moved slowly around the table, setting plates and steadying silverware, giving Marcus all the time in the world to watch his daughter reach for the chocolates he had never intended anyone else to touch. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room. The ceiling fan hummed above us. The sun outside dipped low enough to cast soft orange streaks across the linoleum floor. Everything felt ordinary, comforting even. Except for my son's breathing. Shallow. Fast. Wrong. His daughter, my sweet 11-year-old granddaughter Emma, leaned forward first. Grandma, can I have one? My hand paused midair just long enough for Marcus to notice. Then I nodded gently. Of course, sweetheart. They were made with love. Marcus's jaw tightened. His voice burst out sharper than he meant. Maybe let's wait until after dinner. They might spoil your appetite. His wife rolled her eyes. Marcus, honestly. She's a child. Let her enjoy something sweet. The tension around him stretched thinner, like a rubber band pulled to the point of snapping. I moved quietly to my seat. My knees aren't what they used to be, but tonight somehow they held steady. I could feel him watching my every step, waiting for some signal, some hint that I knew. And I suppose I did. Not the full truth, no. But enough. Because I'd tasted one of those chocolates yesterday. Not much, just a nibble. Not enough to make me sick, just enough to make me wary. Enough to make my tongue tingle for a second longer than it should have. Enough to send a chill crawling up my spine. And enough to make me place the remaining pieces out in the open tonight, where more than one pair of eyes would see them. I folded my hands in my lap and looked at Marcus. Calm, soft, silent. The kind of silence that makes a guilty person unravel. His wife, Sarah, reached for a piece herself. They look fancy. Did you make these at work? New recipe. Marcus swallowed so hard I heard it from across the table. I wouldn't eat those, he blurted. Sarah froze, chocolate inches from her lips. Why not? They're from you. He didn't answer. His eyes darted to me, then back to the bowl, then to his daughter's small fingers pinching the wrapper. I tilted my head ever so slightly. Is something wrong with them, dear? My voice was gentle. Too gentle. The kind of gentle that makes people panic. He shot to his feet so quickly his chair scraped across the floor, the sound slicing through the quiet kitchen. Stop, he shouted. Emma jumped. Sarah stared at him like she'd never seen him before. I remained perfectly still, watching the sweat form along his hairline. Only then did I reach under the edge of the table and touch the small folded wrapper hidden in my sweater sleeve. A wrapper I'd kept after tasting the chocolate yesterday. A wrapper he didn't know I had. A wrapper with tiny brown smudges I had pressed between tissue paper like evidence. He didn't know that part. Not yet. I asked you a question, I said softly. What's wrong with them? Marcus's breath hitched. Nothing. I just messed up the recipe. That's all. He sat down again, but his hands wouldn't stay still. His fingertips drummed against the table. His knee bounced beneath the cloth. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. A lie, even a small one, has a smell. A heaviness. A tremor beneath the voice. And his lie filled that kitchen like smoke. Sarah frowned at him. Marcus, are you okay? You look pale. His jaw clenched. I'm fine. Let's just eat dinner. But none of us moved. The roasted chicken cooled. Emma stared at her father with wide, confused eyes. The fan clicked as its old motor shifted gears. Outside, a dog barked twice and then fell silent. Every small sound suddenly felt too loud. Sarah set the chocolate down slowly, as though placing it on a fault line that might crack beneath her touch. The silence thickened. I leaned forward and smiled, a grandmotherly smile, soft as butter. Marcus, dear, you seem nervous. You weren't nervous when you dropped them off yesterday. His head jerked up. You remember when I remember everything, I said calmly. A flush crept up his neck. And I tasted one, I added, letting the words float into the air like a feather drifting toward a fire. He blinked. You what? Just a small bite, I said. Odd aftertaste. Bitter. I tapped my finger lightly against the tablecloth. But perhaps you mixed something wrong? A different ingredient? Something you didn't usually use. Sarah's eyes snapped to him. What ingredient? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again, swallowed. I could see the fear building behind his eyes. Fear not of being caught but of losing control. And that was when I knew I had him. Emma pushed her chair back slightly. Dad, why are you scared? The innocence of her voice cut through him more sharply than any accusation. He reached for her hand, then stopped halfway as if he knew he didn't deserve to touch her. Finally, he whispered, I need some air. He stood up again, but this time I stood too. My body is old, but my resolve is not. Sit, I said. The word came out steady, quiet, unshakable. The voice of a mother who has finally stopped making excuses. He sat. Not because he wanted to. Because something in my tone told him I knew enough. Just enough. To be dangerous. Sarah's voice cracked. Marcus, what is going on? He didn't look at her. Didn't look at Emma. He stared at the bowl. At the chocolates. At the thing he created. I let the moment stretch just a little more. Enough to pull the viewer closer. Enough to make the tension settle deep into their chest. Then I asked the question that dropped like a stone into still water. Marcus, why are you afraid of your own gift? His breathing stopped for a beat. I watched him. He watched me. And in that taut, airless silence I realized something chilling. He wasn't afraid of the chocolates. He was afraid of what they revealed about him. Before he could answer, Sarah's fork slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a metallic clang. The sound shattered the moment. And that is exactly where the scene must end. A cliff. A breath held. A truth half revealed. The sound of Sarah's fork hitting the floor still echoed in the silence when Marcus jerked his head toward her, startled, as if the smallest noise could shatter whatever control he had left. His eyes darted back to the bowl of chocolates, then to me, then to the floor where the fork lay, glinting under the overhead light like a warning neither of us dared to speak out loud. For a moment no one moved. I could feel my own heartbeat thudding gently against my ribs, slow and steady, nothing like the frantic rhythm pulsing through my son. And as I watched him struggle to steady his breathing, I realized something unsettling. It wasn't the chocolate he feared anymore. It was the truth creeping toward him inch by inch like a shadow he could no longer outrun. He bent down to pick up the fork for his wife, but his hand shook so badly the metal clinked against the tile twice before he managed to grasp it. I saw Sarah's face soften with confusion, not sympathy. She didn't understand yet, but she sensed something was profoundly wrong. She whispered, Marcus, why are you acting like this? He didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on me again, searching my face for clues. What I knew, how much I understood, whether he could still control the narrative. I let him look. I even leaned back a little, giving him more space to study me, because sometimes silence tells more truth than any confrontation ever could. It worked. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, like he was swallowing a confession he wasn't ready to speak. When he finally forced out a weak, let's just forget the chocolates, his voice cracked on the last word. That was the first crack. But it wasn't the only one. Sarah nudged her chair back, just slightly, as though putting distance between herself and her husband could make the tension easier to breathe through. Her eyes flickered to Emma, who was watching us all with that trusting innocence only children have. The kind that makes you feel both protective and terribly guilty at the same time. I knew I needed to speak. Not harshly, not accusingly, but with the kind of calm truth that pierces deeper than anger ever could. So I folded my napkin, placed it neatly beside my plate, and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Marcus, dear. You're trembling." He snapped his head toward me again. "I'm not." But the denial trailed off when he realized his hands were visibly shaking on the table, fingertips tapping in small, frantic rhythms he wasn't aware of. Another crack. I watched him pull his hands into his lap, hiding them like a child caught stealing cookies. He didn't realize how much that small gesture betrayed. Guilt reveals itself through the body long before the mind decides to speak. Sarah leaned forward now, alert and wary. "Marcus, what's going on?" She enunciated each word as though peeling back layers. I could see the fear widening in his eyes. Not fear of her question, but fear that I might answer it before he did. So I stayed quiet. Silence is a powerful ally when you're dealing with someone unraveling. The clock on the wall ticked loudly behind us, each second stretching thinner, longer, almost painful in its pacing. After several long breaths, Marcus forced a smile. It was stiff, unnatural, a smile held together by desperation instead of warmth. I made a mistake while experimenting," he stammered. "That's all. I used something I shouldn't have." Sarah frowned. "Used what you shouldn't have for what?" "Homemade chocolate." A laugh of disbelief slipped out, sharp and humorless. He swallowed hard. "It was supposed to be harmless. Just something to help with flavor." Flavor. I almost let out a bitter laugh. But I didn't. Instead, I gently reached for my water glass, letting the moment hang between us like a question no one wanted to answer. But I wasn't letting him off that easily. "Funny," I murmured, lifting the glass to my lips. "When I tasted it, it didn't strike me as a flavoring problem." Marcus's face drained of color so fast it frightened even me. His breath hitched and Sarah blinked, slowly processing what I had just implied. "Mom," Marcus said in a soft, warning tone, "please don't start." "Start what?" I interrupted softly. "Asking why something you baked caused such panic the moment you saw someone else touch it?" His shoulders slumped, not out of defeat but out of exhaustion. Fear drains people. Makes them smaller. And in that moment he looked small. A grown man shrinking inside his own skin. Emma, sweet girl, reached for her father's arm. "Dad, did you put something yucky in them?" Her simple question made him flinch. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. She was adding pieces together. The trembling hands, the panicked shout, the sudden desperation to avoid anyone eating the chocolates. I could see the realization forming. Slow, quiet, but real. Marcus tried to redirect. "Let's just move on. I'm tired, okay?" But the room didn't allow him to escape. The air felt heavier now, thick with something I was only beginning to glimpse but not ready to name. A mother's intuition always senses danger before it fully arrives, like a storm building beneath still skies. I cleared my throat, letting my voice steady the moment. "Marcus, I think you should explain what you meant by wrong ingredient. It would help everyone relax." Everyone except him, of course. His eyes snapped to mine with a silent plea. "Don't. Please don't." And I understood something then, something unsettling enough to raise goosebumps along my arms. He didn't fear the truth. He feared exposure. He feared the moment Sarah understood. He feared the moment Emma realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. That was the real crack forming. Sarah stood up slowly, pushing her chair back with controlled precision. She walked to the counter and retrieved the small cloth I kept near the sink, then returned to pick up the chocolate she had almost eaten earlier. She held it carefully like it was fragile. Or dangerous. "Marcus," she said, her voice calmer now but firmer, "why would a grown man panic over a piece of chocolate he made himself?" Marcus's breathing turned shallow again. I could feel my heart pounding now, not out of fear for myself but fear of where this moment might lead. Secrets have weight. And whatever secret Marcus was holding, he was suffocating under it. He opened his mouth but no words came. His gaze swept from his wife to his daughter, then fixed back on me as if I held the power to stop time. So I leaned forward, folded my hands gently, and let my voice settle into the warm, steady tone that had raised him all his life. "Marcus," I said, "tell us." Marcus stared at the front door as if the wood itself might split open and drag him into whatever consequences he had been running from. Sarah instinctively pulled Emma closer, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. I rose slowly from my chair, my joints protesting after too long sitting in tension, and moved toward the foyer with steady steps. The knocking stopped when I reached the hallway. Silence again, thick, heavy, uncertain. I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling the cool metal beneath my palm, and took a breath deep enough to keep my voice steady. "Who is it?" I called out. No answer. Another breath. I opened the door. The porch light flickered, casting pale shadows across the front steps. But there was no one there. Only a small envelope resting on the welcome mat, cream-colored, folded neatly, no handwriting on the front. My stomach tightened. Behind me, I sensed Marcus step into the hallway, his breathing shallow, barely audible. He knew something. I could feel it radiating from him like heat. I bent slowly, picked up the envelope and closed the door behind me. He swallowed loudly. "Mom, don't open that." I turned to him, the envelope soft between my fingers. "Why not?" He didn't answer. Sarah stepped forward now, her eyes sharp. "Marcus, what's going on? If this is some kind of joke, it isn't funny." He shook his head, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them or hide the trembling. "Just leave it alone. Please." I didn't. I unfolded the flap and slipped out a single sheet of paper, blank on one side but on the other, a smudged printed label torn from what looked like a delivery box. Just a label. But the moment my eyes landed on the partial return address, something clicked inside me. Something small. Something sharp. The label matched the corner of the chocolate box. The exact font. The exact alignment. The same faint crease pattern. I felt heat rise beneath my skin. Sarah frowned. "What does it mean?" I forced myself to answer calmly. "It means someone wanted this to be seen." Her breath caught. Marcus stepped forward as if trying to take the paper from my hands. "Mom, stop. Please." I moved it behind me. "Sit down, Marcus." He didn't obey, but he didn't move closer either. He just stood there, breathing hard, fists curled against his thighs. Sarah reached for the label, turning it over in her fingers. Why would someone drop this on the porch? I didn't answer. Truthfully, I didn't know. But I sensed something shifting. Something beneath the surface, like soil disturbed around roots you didn't know were rotting. I folded the label carefully, placed it inside the envelope and set it on the console table near the coats. Then I said softly, "I think we all need some air." Sarah nodded. Emma clung to her side. Marcus looked like he wanted to refuse, but he followed anyway when I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The evening had grown colder. Crisp air brushed against my cheeks, carrying the faint smell of pine from the trees bordering my driveway. Streetlights flickered on, one by one, stretching thin yellow beams across the quiet cul-de-sac. I wrapped my sweater tighter around my shoulders. Sarah whispered, "That label, is it from the same place he bought the ingredients?" Marcus closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "Sarah, please." She stepped away from him. "No. I want answers." He didn't speak. I turned toward him. "Marcus, what was in the shed?" His eyes snapped open. His entire body stiffened. The reaction was instant, involuntary. A truth exposed without a word spoken. And I knew. Not the whole truth, not yet, but enough. Something in me hardened. Something old, something worn down from years of excuses and hoping and looking the other way. I took a slow breath. "I'm driving home with you." He blinked. "What?" I repeated, "We're going to your house." Sarah exchanged a glance with me. "Should we go too?" I shook my head. "Take Emma home. Let her rest. Marcus and I need to talk." Marcus stepped forward, panic rising. "Mom, no. Not tonight. It's late." "It's early enough," I said, walking past him toward my car. He grabbed my arm, not roughly but firmly enough to reveal desperation. "Mom, please don't. There's nothing in the shed." I pulled my arm free, steady as stone. "Then you won't mind showing me." He stared at me, breathing hard, caught between lies he couldn't maintain and truths he couldn't hide. Finally, he exhaled shakily and muttered, "Fine." Sarah's voice trembled behind us. "Marcus, what did you do?" He didn't answer her. Minutes later, I was in the passenger seat of his car, the engine humming as we merged onto the quiet road leading to his neighborhood. The streetlights blurred into faint streaks as we passed them. He gripped the wheel too tightly. I watched his knuckles whiten with every turn. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence pries open doors louder than shouting ever could. When we pulled into his driveway, I noticed the porch light was off. The curtains drawn. The air around the house felt heavier, as though it carried the weight of things unsaid. He cut the engine. Neither of us moved. Finally, I opened my door. "Let's go." He followed slowly, shoulders slumped. The backyard was dimly lit by a motion light near the garage. The grass crunched softly beneath our shoes. Crickets chirped somewhere in the darkness. When we reached the shed, Marcus stopped in front of the door, blocking it with his body. He whispered, "I never wanted you to see this." I didn't push him aside. I simply said, "Move." He did. Reluctantly. Hands shaking. I pulled the handle. The door creaked open. And then I saw it. The scent hit first, chemical, metallic, sharp in my nose. Not strong enough to be dangerous, but noticeable enough that something unfamiliar was inside. A small wooden workbench stood against the back wall, covered in faint powdery smudges. Papers cluttered the surface. Some crumpled, some folded, some stained. A half-rested mixing bowl sat near a small scale. A stack of cheap plastic gloves was tossed carelessly to one side. But what made my pulse thud harder wasn't the mess. It was the box. Identical to the one that arrived at my doorstep. Sitting half-hidden under a folded towel, like he hadn't decided what to do with it yet. The sight tightened my chest. I walked toward the bench, ignoring Marcus's whispered, "Mom, don't touch anything." My fingertips trembled slightly as I lifted one of the papers. Printed instructions. A list of measurements. Notes scribbled in the margins. The kind of information someone prints when they're not confident about what they're handling. "What is this?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. I looked at another paper. The edges were smudged with the same brown residue I'd seen on the wrapper I saved. And suddenly my throat felt dry. "Marcus," I whispered, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. "Where did you get these instructions?" He covered his face with both hands. "Mom, please." "From where, Marcus?" He lowered his hands, eyes wet. "Online. A forum." A cold shiver crawled up my spine. Not out of fear, out of grief. Grief that the boy I raised had gone to a stranger's forum for guidance on something he should never have touched. I forced myself to stay calm. "Why?" He shook his head, tears slipping down his face. "I didn't think. I just didn't think." I stepped closer. "Didn't think what?" He backed away a step, hitting the wall of the shed. "I didn't think it would matter," he whispered. I stared at him, my son trembling, remorseful, terrified. And the anger inside me twisted into something deeper. Something older. It wasn't just what he had done. It was what he had become. I turned back to the workbench, scanning for more clues. My gaze settled on a notebook lying partially open. My fingers reached for it before I could stop myself. Inside were dates. Attempts. Failures. Adjustments. My breath caught. He had tried more than once. I closed the notebook gently, pressing it shut with trembling fingers. Then I looked at the second box under the towel again. A second box. A second attempt. And something inside me broke. Not loudly, not violently, but softly, like the quiet snap of an old branch weathered beyond repair. I turned to him. "Marcus," I said in a voice that no longer needed calmness or softness or patience, "you need to tell me the truth." He opened his mouth to speak. But before a word could escape, a rustling sound came from just outside the shed. Both of us froze. Another sound. Closer now. Footsteps on the grass. And as the shadow moved across the shed window, I realized we weren't alone. And whatever truth he thought he was ready to confess, someone else was ready to hear it too. The shadow outside the shed window shifted again, stretching across the dusty wall like a long, dark brushstroke. Marcus stiffened beside me, his breath catching in his throat. Even in the dim light of the shed, I saw the terror flicker across his face. Raw, unfiltered, the kind he couldn't disguise anymore. I held up a hand, signaling him to stay still. The footsteps outside paused. My heart thumped once, heavy and deliberate. I had the strange sensation of being watched by something I couldn't see, like eyes lurking just beyond the faint glow of the motion light. "Mom," he whispered, voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I stepped toward the shed door quietly, each movement measured, careful. The cool night air seeped into my skin, sending a shiver through my arms. I reached the doorway and slowly eased the door open an inch, letting the hinges creak just enough to warn whoever stood outside that I was aware of their presence. A small gasp sounded from the yard. Not a grown man's voice. Not a stranger's voice. A child's. Grandma. Emma. My chest tightened, not with fear but with something far more fragile. I pushed the door open wider, and there she stood in the faint circle of the motion light, clutching a small jacket around her pajamas. Before I could speak, Sarah rushed into view behind her, breathing hard as if she had been running. Her hair was messy, her shoes half-tied, her eyes wild with worry. I'm sorry, she panted. She wouldn't go to bed. She kept saying something felt wrong. I didn't want her wandering alone, so I followed her. Marcus stumbled toward them, voice cracking. Sarah, why did you bring her here? Sarah shot him a glare so sharp it sliced through the night air. I didn't bring her. She followed us. He scared Marcus. She feels something in this house isn't right and she's not wrong. Emma stepped toward me and slipped her small hand into mine. Her fingers were cold. The kind of cold that comes from fear, not weather. Grandma, she whispered, why were you in Daddy's shed? Why were you looking at his things? Her innocence ached. It cut deeper than any accusation. And in that moment I realized something. Children sometimes sense truths adults try desperately to ignore. Before I could answer her, Sarah pushed past Marcus and stepped into the shed behind me. She stopped in the doorway. Her eyes traveled across the workbench, the bottles, the powder-smudged equipment, the scattered notes. Her breath hitched and she covered her mouth with her hand, letting out a quiet, involuntary whimper. What is all this? She whispered. Marcus spun toward her, panic surging. Sarah, don't jump to conclusions. She turned to him slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. Conclusions? Marcus, look at this place. This isn't baking. This isn't experimenting. This is. Her words caught, strangled by fear. Emma tugged at my hand, sensing the tension thickening around us. I knelt down beside her. Sweetheart, I said softly, I need you to wait in the house with your mom, okay? Her lip trembled. Is Daddy in trouble? I swallowed hard, feeling my heart twist. Not trouble with you, I whispered. Never with you. But grown-up choices have grown-up consequences. She hesitated, then wrapped her arms around my neck in a quick, tight hug. Please don't fight, she whispered. I'm not here to fight, I told her gently. I'm here to understand. Sarah guided her toward the house, her hand trembling slightly as she held Emma's. Before following them inside, she turned back and looked at Marcus with something broken in her eyes. We'll talk inside, she said quietly. Marcus reached out as if to stop her, but she stepped away. She didn't want his touch. Not tonight. When they disappeared through the back door, the yard fell silent again. Only the distant buzz of a street lamp hummed in the background. Marcus sank onto an overturned bucket near the shed door, burying his face in his hands. Mom, he whispered, voice muffled. I didn't want you to see this. I didn't want them to see this. I stepped further inside, examining the workspace with steadier eyes now that Sarah was gone. The mixing bowl still held faint streaks of brown. The scale was coated with powder too fine to be cocoa. The torn sheets on the bench showed scribbled adjustments, arrows, warnings. Nothing about this looked like someone messing up a recipe. Looked like someone who had tested, corrected, and tried again. I picked up a crumpled paper near the corner of the bench. The smudged ink revealed part of a printed paragraph. Not for ingestion without proper dilution. Risk of severe. The rest was torn. I set it down gently, then looked at Marcus. His shoulders were shaking. Why? I asked softly. Why this? Why now? He didn't lift his head. You won't understand. Try me. He rubbed his wrists as though they burned. I was overwhelmed. With everything. The pressure. The expectations. The money problems. I felt trapped. And I was the escape? My voice broke, not loudly but enough. He winced. No, he whispered. Not like that. I waited. He finally raised his head, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. I didn't plan anything at first. Not really. I just wanted a break. Reset. I wanted space to breathe without feeling judged or compared or told what to do. His voice wavered. But then, it spiraled. I didn't speak. Letting him fill the silence was more powerful than any question I could ask. He took a shaky breath. I ordered the ingredients. I told myself it was harmless. Just experimenting. Just an idea that I'd never actually follow through with. But then I saw how you were getting older. Tired. Alone. Something sharp twisted inside my ribs. He kept talking. I convinced myself I was doing you a favor. I blinked once. Fully. Because the alternative was letting something inside me shatter too fast. He misunderstood the silence as accusation. I swear, Mom, I never meant for anyone else to eat them. Not Sarah. Not Emma. Not anyone. That's why I panicked. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I just didn't think. You thought enough to build all this, I whispered, gesturing around the shed. He flinched. I know how it looks. But you have to believe me. I don't have to believe anything. He froze. I stood straighter now, my voice steadying into something clearer, colder, but not cruel. I've spent years believing you. Believing in you. Believing the excuses, the half-truths, the apologies. I shook my head. Tonight isn't about belief. It's about facts. He swallowed. And the fact, I continued, is that this shed didn't appear in one night. This took time. Planning. Repetition. He looked down at his lap, defeated. I felt exhaustion settle into my bones. Not physical but emotional, heavy as wet cloth. I'm going inside, I said quietly. Your wife deserves to know the truth. And so do you. I walked toward the house, each step slow, deliberate, as though I was walking across a frozen lake where everything beneath the surface could crack with one wrong move. Marcus followed behind me silently, footsteps dragging through the grass. Inside, Sarah was pacing the living room, holding the folded chocolate wrapper in one hand, the one I had shown her earlier that night. Emma sat curled on the couch, knees hugged to her chest, watching the door with wide eyes. When Sarah saw Marcus, she stopped pacing. Her face hardened. Tell me everything, she said. He hesitated. And that hesitation, pause, that silence, told her more than any confession could. Her expression broke. Disbelief mingling with heartbreak. She stepped back as though she needed the distance to breathe. Marcus, she whispered, what did you do? He opened his mouth. But before the first word could come out, Emma crawled closer to me, clutching my sweater. Grandma, she whispered, voice trembling, is Daddy bad? My breath caught in my throat. I didn't answer her. Because whatever truth I was ready to share with Sarah, I wasn't ready to hand that truth to a child. Not yet. And that is where this section must end. A family standing on the edge. A truth beginning to surface. A man about to face the people he harmed. And a grandmother holding the pieces together. For now. Emma stayed wrapped around me, holding onto my sweater like she always did when thunderstorms shook the windows at night. Except this time the storm wasn't outside. He was sitting in the center of the living room, breathing hard, trying to hold himself together. Marcus wiped his face with trembling hands and sank onto the edge of the coffee table. He couldn't look at his daughter. He couldn't look at his wife. And for the first time in years, he couldn't look at me. Sarah exhaled shakily. Emma, sweetheart, why don't you go upstairs and brush your teeth? I'll come tuck you in soon. Emma hesitated, her eyes darting between the three of us. Are you going to yell? No, I whispered, smoothing her hair. No yelling tonight. She nodded slowly, then walked upstairs, pausing on the last step to look back at her father. Eyes full of worry he didn't deserve but still had. When she finally disappeared down the hallway, the house grew unbearably heavy. Marcus's shoulders collapsed inward, trembling under the weight of his choices. Sarah stood with her arms crossed tightly, her face pale, her jaw clenched. I sat on the couch, folding my hands in my lap. The quiet stretched thin, one breath then another, until Sarah broke it. Tell me, she said, her voice low and shaking. Tell me why there is a shed full of chemicals in my backyard. Tell me why you panicked when I touched a chocolate. Tell me why our daughter had to sense fear in her own home before I did. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. So I spoke. Because, I said softly, he didn't want anyone else to eat the chocolates. Not even by accident. Sarah turned to me sharply. Why? I steadied my voice. Because the chocolates weren't meant to be eaten. Marcus slammed his fist against his knee, frustration erupting. Mom, stop twisting this. I'm not twisting anything, I said calmly. Your own shed tells the story. Sarah stared at him stunned. Marcus, what is she saying? He stood up abruptly, pacing the room in frantic steps. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Nobody understands. I was under pressure. I was drowning. I wasn't thinking straight. I needed a break. A break from what? Sarah asked, voice shaking. From your job. Your marriage. From your own mother. He froze. Completely. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Were the chocolates for her, Marcus? For your mother? Is that what this is? His face twisted in anguish. He didn't answer. So the silence answered for him. Sarah gasped and covered her mouth. Oh my God. I watched her knees weaken. She grabbed the arm of the recliner to steady herself. Marcus sat down again, burying his head in his hands. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I swear I didn't. The idea slipped in. Then I convinced myself it was stupid. Then I convinced myself it was mercy. Then I convinced myself you'd be better off. Better off dead? Sarah whispered. His shoulders lifted in a weak, defeated shrug. It was the smallest movement. And the worst answer. Sarah stumbled back, shaking her head. I can't be in this room with you right now. She walked toward the front door, grabbed her coat, then turned back to me. I'm taking Emma to my sister's tonight. Marcus leapt up. Sarah, please don't take her. Don't take my daughter. I'll fix this, She looked at him with a grief so deep it made my chest ache. You can't fix this with a promise, she whispered. Not this. When the door closed behind her, the silence left behind felt like a collapse. Marcus stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door he couldn't walk through, trembling like the ground beneath him had vanished. I remained on the couch watching him. For the first time in all our years together, he looked like a man without a mother to catch him. Good. Because I wasn't catching him this time. He turned slowly toward me. Mom, please. Don't leave me alone. I looked at him, not as the boy I raised, not as the child I once rocked to sleep, not as the man I hoped he'd become, but as the man he was now. A man who built a shed. A man who took notes. A man who created and tested and refined. A man who didn't panic until someone else tasted his creation. You weren't alone when you made your choices, I said quietly. So you won't be alone when they catch up with you. He sank onto the rug, sitting on his knees like a child who had done something unforgivable. Maybe he had. Mom, he whispered, I didn't think it would come to this. It wasn't supposed to come to this, I corrected him. But you kept pushing it. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. I'm scared. You should be. He flinched at my tone. I almost softened it, but then I remembered the bite of chocolate on my tongue, that faint bitterness, the label someone dropped on my porch, the shed full of supplies. And my resolve hardened again. You've been scared of the wrong thing, I said. He wiped his face with shaky hands. Please. Please don't call the police. Please. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. Not yet. Instead, I stood up and walked down the hall, leaving him kneeling in the dim light of the living room like a broken statue. Inside the kitchen, I retrieved the envelope with the torn label. I studied it closely, noticing something I hadn't before. A faint thumb smear across the upper corner. A greasy stain. Likely left by whoever had delivered it. Not Marcus. Someone else. Someone who knew. Someone who cared enough, or hated enough, to warn me. Maybe a neighbor. A coworker. A delivery driver who noticed too much. Or someone on the forum he mentioned. For the first time I realized. Marcus wasn't just sloppy. He was being watched. I returned to the living room. Marcus hadn't moved. His breathing was slow, defeated. I sat down across from him. Your family deserves the truth, I said. They deserve safety. And I deserve justice. He lifted his head. Mom, please. I'm still your son. I know, I said, voice steady. And that's why I'm ending this the right way. He froze. What does that mean? I took out my phone. His face crumpled. No. Please. I didn't dial the police. Not yet. I dialed Sarah. She answered on the second ring. Hello. Her voice sounded small, shaken. Sarah, I said, you need to know everything. Not the pieces he told you. All of it. And there, in that quiet living room where the truth finally had no place left to hide, I told her. Everything. The shit. The instructions. The second box. The residue. The label on my porch. The notebook filled with attempts. She didn't speak for several seconds. When she finally did, her voice was steady. "I'll call Officer Miller," she said. "The one who helped my sister during that break-in last year. He's someone we can trust." "Good," I said. When I hung up, Marcus was staring at me like he no longer recognized me. "You betrayed me," he whispered. "No," I corrected him. "I finally stopped betraying myself." He shook his head, tears burning down his cheeks. "I'm your son." "You were," I said quietly. "Before you decided I was disposable." He broke then, his shoulders collapsing, his breath hitching in painful bursts. But I didn't move toward him. I didn't comfort him. I didn't save him. Not this time. Minutes later, blue lights glowed softly through the curtains. No sirens, no spectacle, just a quiet arrival. Officer Miller knocked on the door gently, respectful, as though he knew this house was already broken enough. I stood. I walked to the door. Marcus whispered behind me, "Mom, please. Don't open it." But I opened it anyway. Officer Miller stepped inside, his face solemn as I handed him the envelope, the wrapper, the photos, and the truth. He nodded once. "We'll take it from here." Marcus crumbled when they asked him to stand. "Mom, I'm sorry." I nodded once. "I know." He reached toward me, but I stepped back. "I still love you," he said, desperate, breathless. "I know," I whispered. "But loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you." He sobbed as they led him out the door. I closed it behind them. The house fell silent again. For the first time in years. I breathed. Slow. Free. I walked to the dining table and picked up the crystal bowl, the chocolates still glimmering under the soft kitchen light. Then I carried them outside to the trash bin and dropped each piece in one by one. When the last one fell, I whispered the words I had swallowed for too long. "I choose myself now." And the night finally felt clean. If this story touched you, don't leave without joining our little community. Subscribe so you never miss tomorrow's story. Your support keeps these voices alive.